Hello, Namaskar. Welcome to my pod, the CAA Show. CAA, as all of you know, is Conversations and Analysis. My name is Juggi Bhasin. To become a subscriber, all you have to do is to press that red button on your screen, and subscription is, of course, completely free. Why is it that India is being targeted almost on a daily basis by Western powers? Uh, why is it that our counter narrative is not being believed by anyone in the Western world? And why do I say that? I say that because I'm sitting in a capital in the West. And when I talk to people around here, more and more people want to believe all the negativism about India. And what is this negativism about? I'll give you three big instances where people are actually believing all the negative stuff about India. Now, the first one, the Operation Sindoor story. Today, of course, there was this news that the US administration has said that 5 planes were downed in the India-Pakistan conflict, though it was not mentioned that who had downed those planes and which or whose side those planes had been down. But the inference was clear that probably these planes were those of India. Then again, in the Air India story, the inference has been that Captain Sabharwal deliberately crashed the plane. And then, in the third instance, that is the NATO Secretary General story, where the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, had said secondary sanctions would be imposed on India. And indeed, sanctions have been imposed by the EU on the second largest oil refinery of Gujarat for oil trade with Russia. These things are actually happening. Some of the negativism, which, as I said, is being believed more and more in the West. And therefore, I'm asking the pertinent question that why, number one, is India being targeted almost on a daily basis? What is the real big reason for that? And why can't we stop this targeting? Why are we unable to stop this targeting? I'm going to try and answer all these questions in today's podcast. But let's start. Let's start with the NATO story first of all, the Mark Rutte story, where the Secretary General of NATO had targeted India. Now, who is Mark Rutte? Who is the Secretary General of NATO? He is, end of the day, he's not a head of state. He is a military bureaucrat. A military bureaucrat. It does not matter. He's the top dog in NATO. But he is not the head of state. He's not Macron or he is not Meloni. He is not the Prime Minister of UK. He's not of that level at all. He is at the end of the day a military bureaucrat. But even then, a military bureaucrat actually talks to reporters and targets India. How does he do that? Why does he do that? Or does he not even understand the fact that there is a trade deal in the offing between the EU and India, which is in the works, which could get affected by these statements, but he doesn't bother with that. He still makes those statements. And to top it, as I said, the sanctions actually do happen. The EU has sanctioned an oil refinery in Gujarat. Why are people like that getting away with this and negating the India story almost on a daily basis? And then again, this the as I said, the Air India story. If you watch the Megyn Kelly show, or if you watch other major podcasts which are going on around the world, podcasts in the UK and other places, and everybody appears inclined to believe the Wall Street Journal story, the Reuters story, that it was Captain Sabharwal who was responsible for the crash. He deliberately crashed the plane. He tinkered with the fuel switches. Now, there has to be a reason why all this is happening. Could the reason be that these people are extremely anxious? Everyone, all these parties are extremely anxious. Are these parties afraid that India really is, has kind of outpaced all of them in its progress, in its outreach, in its relations with all over the world. India is not towing the line. All that could be true. I'm not for a moment doubting that, because, as I said, this is the India story in today's day and age. It's the Indian century, and all that is working for us. And in my podcast after podcast, I've said the Indian story has finally arrived. We are making a mark on the stage. We are sitting on the high table with other parties on the world stage. All that is absolutely true. And in a certain sense, if you think about it, then it is a compliment to you that people are targeting you, which means that you are not any longer a nobody. You are somebody. You are a person. You are a country of significance, of importance. And that is the reason really why people are targeting you in the from all quarters, I would say, especially from the Western world. So, in a certain sense, it's something to be, in a strange way, it's something to be proud of. That, yeah, sure, we have arrived on the stage, and therefore people are targeting us. But yet, at the same time, it is not a comfortable feeling that you get targeted without any rhyme or reason. And let me explain to you why the targeting is unfair. First, let me talk about that. Then I will tell you the real reason why this targeting is taking place. For instance, in Operation Sindhu, when you fight somebody like Pakistan, for instance, and whatever anybody would say, but Pakistan still has a very large army. It has the navy is nothing, no great shakes, but it has a bit of a credible air force. It has all those assets, and therefore, when you fight that, then it is not exactly a completely a one-sided fight. There are chances we could have taken some losses, but my only point in this entire narration is that we might have taken a few losses in terms of some of our aircraft going down. But the fact of the matter is we hit those air bases. The fact of the matter is that we hit those terrorist camps. Now, nobody disputes that. Actually, not even Pakistan, if you look at it very closely. Even the Western world says, yes, India hit those air bases, the satellite imagery, all those things are out there. But the problem is that the narration again comes back and again to these 4 or 5 planes which were hit ostensibly by Pakistan, where India took some losses. Nobody knows. Maybe not even a single plane went down. But the fact is, we have not said officially, within quotes, officially anything on the matter. And therefore, all this speculation is going on. And these statements are being made practically on a daily basis. My simple question, and the point which I want to answer out here, is that why all this is happening is because we only, despite all our positivity, despite all our achievement, despite all the hard work we have done, despite the magnificent victory that we have achieved in Operation Sindoor, despite the coming of age of our aviation sector, because please remember, this Air India story is against the backdrop of the fact that India's aviation sector is perhaps the fastest growing aviation sector in the world today. And some of the most biggest airports in the world now are right now in India. And in a strange way, this drubbing which India is receiving in aviation circles is again set against this particular backdrop. Keep that in mind. And again, why NATO is targeting India is because where India and who India sides with, or who India supports, or whether India even remains neutral matters it matters a lot actually in the world today, whether it's be it NATO, or whether it be SCO, whether it be AUKUS, or any other kind of military, or any other kind of alliance in the world. It really matters what India is talking about, which side it is on. So all that, keep that background in mind. But the fact of the matter is that this negativism is coming again and in India against India is because partly, yes, the Western media, partly, yes, a certain policy in Western Europe, and I would say certainly in America also, is by force of habit or by nature, they have always been against India. That is part is accepted. That we accept. But it is also, I'm arguing, it is these barbs, these accusations are coming on a daily basis because we have allowed this to happen. And what do I mean by that? What I really mean by that is it's not so much in terms of our achievement. It is not so much in terms of our military prowess, in terms of our technical and technological innovation, all which was on display during Operation Sindoor, for instance, it is because of the simple fact that we cannot state our case properly to the world. And that is why this large vacuum develops, and people then jump into this vacuum, take advantage of this vacuum, and turn the narration on its head and give this negative impression of India to the world. Now, I'll again talk of these three instances and tell you where we have gone wrong in terms of narrating our credible story to the world, allowing vested interests to turn the story on its head and give a wrong impression of India to the world. Let's take, for instance, let's start with Operation Sindoor. As I argued a little earlier, that certainly it is possible that we might have lost maybe a couple of aircraft. I don't even know if we lost a single aircraft also. But since there has been no confirmation, I'm assuming that, okay, maybe we might have taken one or two losses. But that's absolutely okay. Because please remember one thing. It is one thing to maintain strategic autonomy. It is one thing to be strategically, sometimes even duplicitous, where you're not exactly knowing, you're showing your stance and telling it to people. But when it comes to communication on strategic matters, when it comes to strategic communication on defense matters, when it comes to communication on vital interests, then you have to be absolutely clear. You cannot afford ambiguity in that communication. And I fail to understand that till now, even till today, why hasn't the government really come out and clearly stated what exactly were the pluses and the minuses of Operation Sindoor? Because in my reading, there were only pluses in Operation Sindoor. And we should have officially communicated to the whole world what we have achieved in Operation Sindoor. But officially, yes, there have been certain statements made by the CDS, the Chief of the Defense Staff, and certain forums and all that. But still, that full-throated statement, that clarity has still not particularly come. Numbers, figures, losses, profit, gain, losses, all these things should have been given. And to my mind, it was very, very clear, the overall story, that we scored these magnificent victories against the terrorist bases in Pakistan, number one. And number two, we hit their air bases. I mean, that is no small thing, because if you hit an air base, you hit the runway, you hit hangars, satellite imagery has shown that again and again. That means you don't just hit empty hangars, you're hitting hangars which are packed with planes. Please tell about those losses, about the physical losses, the aircraft which the Pakistanis have lost, the net value of the losses. Why has this not been communicated? We just leave it to podcasters. You just leave it to informed sources within quotes. You just leave it to, our sources have told us. That is not credible. The credibility will only come where you actually call a press conference of the whole world. Call them at the Press Information Bureau in New Delhi. Collect everybody, all the Western media, or the Indian media, everybody. Let very people from the armed forces sit there and give out the facts and figures. And then you will, for once and all, you will stop this narration which is going around. Oh, so many aircraft, India lost so many aircraft, and India was not particularly well, or did well in Operation Sindoor. Because unfortunately, and as I said, I'm sitting in a Western capital right now, and I'm talking to people, and a lot of the people actually believe the negative side of the story. They don't believe the positivity or the good things or the wonderful things we have achieved in Operation Sindoor. Similarly, in the NATO story, when this NATO story broke, and please remember, the initial statement came from, as I'm repeating again and again, from a military bureaucrat. What is a bureaucrat as compared to a heads of state? He's talking about India. Who is Mark Rutte? He's just a military bureaucrat. And a very strong rejoinder should have been in. And yes, I know of this particular press conference which was given by the MEA, by the spokesperson, and he said no double standards should have been applied. He said, But that is not a very strong rejoinder to my mind. I think it's actually a very weak rejoinder. This person should have been taken by name and he should have been put in his place, and a rejoinder should have come. I would even say not even by the spokesperson of the MEA, but probably by the foreign minister himself. That statement should have been made. That who is the Secretary General to talk about imposing sanctions on India, a country of 1.4 billion people, a country which is on the move, a country which is doing very well in every possible aspect. Why was it not strong? I can understand at one level that in certain matters you need to maintain a certain level of ambiguity, or you hedge your way, you hedge your time. But even for instance, when the statements are coming from America, I think those statements also needed to be given a response. No clear response has been given. The statement, though, that the ceasefire was brought on by the Americans has been made again and again and again and again. And till now, there has been no clear communication from our side that yes, I think some statements have been made, but it probably has to come at even at senior levels, that this is not the way it happened. This is exactly the timeline, the everything has to be said very specifically. And along with that, the military communication has to come, that this is what we gained from Operation Sindoor. This is the havoc we wreaked on the Pakistanis. These are the losses which the Pakistanis took. Because unless that comes, these statements, these negative statements, will be made again and again by people all over the world. We need to keep that in mind. And the short point which I'm making is that why do we hesitate to clearly put forward our case? What is it that we are gaining? I certainly don't believe in this dictum that keep quiet, hedge your time, let the worst will be over, then it will all go away. It doesn't go away. You live in a world where communication is as lethal a weapon as an advanced missile which you might be developing. And if you lose the battle of communication, then you lose the entire plot, you lose the entire narrative. And I'm getting worried because, as I said, I'm talking to people, so many people out there sitting in a Western capital, and it appears more and more to me that people are believing all the negative things of India. They don't believe in the positivity of the India story. And if the fault has to be given, then it has to be given in the people who manage the communication of the government. It is not so much as the government, it is not so much as the policy, it is not so much as the operations people, it is the people who handle the communication who are doing a very poor job of it. We are just not stating our case properly to the world. And therefore, I'm repeating again, in all three instances, in the Mark Rutte case, you should have had a communication where you should have put the man in his place. You should have shown to him that he's at the end of the day just a military bureaucrat and nothing else. That's it. There are hundreds and thousands of military. He's not a head of state. And you still have the FTA, which is with the EU. You have bargaining chips in your hand. You are negotiating a very important deal with France worth almost 61,000 crores for for your future aircraft, fighter aircraft, which will come to India. Yeah, there are all kind of negotiations which are going on with the United Kingdoms in terms of a trade deal. All these things are going on. You have just finalized a major deal, not a trade deal, but a major deal with Switzerland, which is worth almost 100 billion. All kinds of deals are in the offing. And therefore, you need to pick up the phone. You need to speak, if necessary, to these heads of states, to the people who matter, that why don't you control this military bureaucrat in your own NATO ranks? How is he making these treatments? And now that sanctions have been imposed, what are you going to do about it on this oil refinery? Will you just let it go? Will you just accept it? And I am a great fan, for instance, of the Petroleum Minister of India. He is a man who never shies from calling a spade a spade. But strangely, I thought that this time around, when it came to somebody was asking him about this Russian oil, the Indian trade in Russian oil, and how the Mark Rutte statement would affect the flow of oil and all that. he made a statement to the effect that we are not worried at all, and we will probably have alternatives to Russia and all. What did that mean? It means that are you prepared to accept the sanctions which the likes of these Secretary General and all these NATO people and other people will apply on you, and then you will bypass Russia and then you will go for other sources of oil? Of course, we can go for other sources of oil. That is no big deal. There are so many people now, there are so many suppliers of oil in the world. That is not a problem at all. I think the real problem would be that are you going to ditch a country which has stood by you, with which you have had trade, which has actually helped you? Because people say, oh, we have helped Russia in terms of, buying oil from them. I think we have also been helped in the process by buying oil at fairly discounted prices. It has kept inflation low in our country also. And are we going to just leave it just like that because some military bureaucrat gets up one day and he makes a play at, oh, we will impose these sanctions on India? Just like, it smacks, actually, it reminds me of the way the East India Company actually came into India and the way they were behaving initially when they entered into India. This imperial kind of arrogance. And are we just going to accept that? That is the question we need to answer. That are we going to, in all these cases, accept this imperial arrogance that anybody gets up and threatens India and we will impose sanctions on India and we just keep quiet and, oh, yeah, yeah, we will find ways and alternative to it? I would have expected a more forthright response from maybe from the petroleum minister. Not that I'm complaining. He's otherwise been a very forthright, a very tough man, and he always puts forward his point of view very, very clearly. But in this case, I thought there was a bit of hedging around, and I really don't understand why. And therefore, the question which I am saying is, pressure is only pressure when you allow it to overwhelm you. Otherwise, you can throw the pressure right back, because there are things which you're giving to the other side. There are things which are being negotiated with the Western world. There are trade deals. There are even military deals. And the funny thing is, there are even reports which are coming that if NATO members, which they are now embarking on raising the defense budgets to 5% of their overall budget, but they don't have the means to produce all those weapons. So probably they will get those weapons from America. But there also there's talk that a lot of these weapons would be outsourced. They would be manufactured in India. In other words, that India would get a lot of these contracts for manufacturing. Now, if all that is happening, how can a military bureaucrat, that is the Secretary General, get up and threaten? He actually threatened India. Sanctions is a threat to India. It was absolutely explicit and straight. And why are we not doing something more about it? Why are we not giving it back to these kind of people? That's the question we need to ask. It doesn't matter, big country, middle level country, small country, any kind of country. This is India's moment. This is India's time. We need to stand up. We need to take a stand. Our communication has to be crystal clear. It has to be decisive. It has to be authoritative. Um, and at so many levels, there's nothing much that one can learn from China. But there is one thing which I would say we have to learn from China is the way they manage when attacks come on them, how they stand up. That's the other thing, which is the only thing which I think from China which one can learn from. They don't. They just give it back twice with whatever they receive. I think that's maybe a leaf we have to take out from that particular playbook out there. Um, there are people who are certainly envious. There are people who are certainly angry, I would say. There are people who cannot understand that why India is not towing the line. And as I'm repeating again and again, I understand that we function at a certain level where we keep things close to our chest. Fair enough. There's a certain ambiguity we retain about certain things, fine. But beyond a certain thing, it's not good, it's not beneficial, it hurts the country. And therefore, I'm saying the people who are in charge of giving out the message, of narrating the story, they have to be forthright, they have to be clear, they have to give forceful messages, because only forceful messages are respected by the world. These kind of wishy-washy, ambiguous messages, nobody takes it very seriously, and people will keep on piling the pressure on you unless you take a decisive stand and give it back. And so, on this note, I come to the end of this podcast. I hope you liked it. You like the show. Do subscribe to it. And on this note, it's goodbye and cheers from my side.